Welcome to the Story Clicks podcast, where we explore ways to grow business, develop creativity, and live better. I'm your host, Māris Prindulis. Do you want to increase your media presence but struggle to develop a compelling PR story that grabs journalists' attention? Today, our guest is experienced PR pro, Caruana, who will introduce her framework called GOTHAM. After learning this framework, you can craft a draft for your PR story faster and more confidently. Jo runs her company, Finesse Group, which offers PR and marketing services. Jo has been on our show before, demystifying PR for business owners. If you want a broader look at the possibilities for your PR, find the previous episode in the show notes. In today's episode, Jo will kindly guide me through her GOTHAM framework to create a PR story. And enjoy the episode with Jo Caruana. I'm excited to have Jo Caruana back on our show, and we are going to talk about GOTHAM framework, which is Jo's PR framework. Jo, welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much. It's lovely to be back, Māris. Thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, I'm excited to talk your listeners through the GOTHAM framework, which was designed to make it really easy to identify a great story that you as a business owner, as a personal brand, can tell to journalists in the media if you want to boost your PR.
Excellent. Let's do this.
Brilliant. Okay. So the first thing that you need to know is why GOTHAM, right? Why did I come up with the GOTHAM framework? Well, so often when we're working with clients, one of the areas where they get stuck is knowing which story to tell. If you think from a media perspective, from a journalist perspective, the media are looking for stories. They're not looking to talk about your business in the same way you would in your marketing. They're not interested in doing your marketing for you. They're looking for a story that's going to be interesting for their readers or viewers or listeners, depending on if it's a book or a newspaper or a podcast. So a framework is always helpful, isn't it, to guide people on what they need to be talking about. And so the GOTHAM framework was created to work very closely in conjunction with StoryBrand. StoryBrand, I'm sure you've spoken about it on the podcast before. It's all about having a strong story when telling your business story. And then GOTHAM ties in really neatly with that as a PR framework. And GOTHAM essentially stands for 6 different points of your PR story. And very simply, it is G for your area of genius. It is O for what makes you original. It's T for what makes this timely. It's H for who is the interested human. It's A for what's the angle of this story. And it's M for which is the right media to tell the story on. Now, Māris, we're going to be blitzing through this today. So normally when I'm going through clients and this framework, it does take a couple of sessions to really get to the bottom of people's stories. They need to think about, the questions that I ask them. And they also need to reflect on what they're comfortable sharing with the media, because sometimes the strongest story that you have is not necessarily something that you want to have there out in the world and being spoken about all the time. So that's a balance that we walk as PR people, understanding that journalists are interested in telling people's stories, but equally, not everybody wants to tell that story. So Māris, would you be my volunteer today and just help me to answer some of these questions so we can start to show your listeners what that might look like?
Yes, let's do this. I volunteer myself from this big crowd behind me.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's start very simply with your area of genius. And in this one, you are really talking about what you are known for. Okay, so what you are really good at, perhaps. So often this is going to be something you do as your job, something you train to do, but not necessarily. I've had clients when we've sat down and we've really, really worked it out. They decided said that they wanted to focus one of their areas of genius on being really great bakers, for instance, really having the best brownies in the world, or, they're a lawyer, but they're also really good at something else. So I think when you think of your area of genius, Marius, what would you say your expertise is? And I would say the easiest way to figure this out is, what do people come to you for? Whenever people think, Marius, I'm going to go and ask him to help me with X, what might that X be?
That X at StoryClicks is designing stunning branding and websites and crafting clear messages for effective marketing. In one word, all of these activities can be called marketing. However, there's so much more to each one of us than our work. For example, outside the world of StoryClicks, I am into writing music and recording. I wonder how much is it okay to let these worlds overlap before I start confusing people in the way I can help them.
That's interesting, Marius. Okay, so you are like many, many people, right? So we are something/something else, and we have different expertises that sort of make us our unique selves. So let's focus on the fact that, let's focus on marketing, I think, right now, for the purpose of this first story. And it's important to remember that you as a human being, you probably have about 20 different stories that you could tell in different ways. So this framework helps you to think through all of those different angles, all of those different potential stories. So let's focus on you being really good at marketing. And that's a story that perhaps an element of the story that you would want people to know about. So your area of genius is marketing, and that's great. Now, if we move on to O, the leading question for that is, what makes you original? And here we're looking for something, that takes you away from being, in inverted commas, just a marketer, and starts to really humanize you. Because again, this is what people are looking for in the media. They're looking for a human story so that other people can connect to it. So when we talk about things that make us original, I personally often talk about the fact that my husband and I live on a boat a lot of the time. People find that interesting. Whenever I'm sat at a dinner party and I tell that story, you can see that people's eyes, instead of glazing over when I talk about PR and marketing and the other things that I do, when I say I live on a boat, suddenly people are like, oh, that's interesting. And we know from StoryBrand, right, that that's the goal in life. We want to try and find a way to connect to people. So, Marius, what could it be? What makes you different? What makes you original? Maybe you can think about this from a perspective of, if you were at a dinner party and there was somebody there that you were really interested in speaking to, is there a go-to story that you would tell again and again, or something about your life that you think makes you that little bit different?
Even though it's completely unrelated to what I do, but I think I would share my music stories because they're fun. They're just interesting experience as a human being. That's where I would start off.
And delving a little deeper into your sort of musical story, was there anything, particularly brilliant that's happened to you as a musician that you think maybe takes it from being, yes, I'm a musician, to maybe I'm a musician and I got to have this amazing experience?
I'm in a band together with my wife, and the song we produced and wrote really took off in our nation. Went beyond radio into people's lives and became the song for weddings and even funerals for a while. So that's something we are getting a good laugh at. Yeah, that was something that happened, that life gave as an experience and gift, and which is just interesting.
Okay. And so did that song do particularly well? Did it get, to a certain level or anything?
Yes, it was on top of the charts at the time when it was there.
Fantastic. So it reached number 1 in your country.
Yeah.
Amazing. So that's a huge achievement, right? So suddenly you've gone from being a marketer, which is a great thing, to being a marketer who once had a number 1 hit, and whose number 1 hit is still, played again and again at weddings and funerals and family events all over your nation. So again, how much more interesting did your story just get because we just added a little element about what makes you original? Okay, so going further into your story, and this is where sometimes we have to think a little bit harder. And this is when it comes to T, what makes your story timely? So we have to remember that journalists are always looking for something to make the story important right now. They don't want to tell a story that was relevant 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They want to tell a story that's relevant to the world right now. So I think potentially when I spoke about my story quite a lot, in the last couple of years, the boat thing was quite interesting because people were getting more interested in living off grid as a result of COVID. They were interested in alternative lifestyles. A lot of people didn't need to go back to the office. They were working from home. So the fact that we had sort of left our houses and sort of moved into a boat was particularly timely for that moment in history. So let's think about if we're telling your story as a marketer who brings a really unique perspective to marketing because you've had a number one hit. Is there anything you can think of that might make this timely at the moment? Is there anything where you look around the world and based on what's sort of happening in the world, you think music is more important than ever, creativity is more important than ever?
Yes, totally. From music and kind of design world, the playfulness, the power of creativity is really needed to release some steam from people. Maybe when it comes to science and math, there really is like a really narrow gap for variations and there's ideal solutions. But when it comes to creativity, often there are just variations that work best, but they are variations depending on the situation, on the perspective, and that's playfulness, that is creativity. It is really needed, I think, in this time, especially when people have this pressure to be successful, to be this, to be that, and there's some kind of perspective on things.
I really like that, Maurice. That's so interesting. And I love that that's where your mind came to it from. Because to be honest, I was thinking of 10 or 15 different things, but I love that you focused on playfulness as something that you feel people need or perhaps can be helpful at the moment. And you can see how the bridge between your expertise and what makes you original, naturally leads us to a conversation about playfulness and maybe injecting creativity into what you do, enjoying what you do. So I think that's a very interesting area. So let's stay with that. So right now, if we go back over it, we've got your area of genius, which is marketing. We've got what makes you original, which is that you are also a musician who's had a number one hit and who continues to bring joy to people's lives in their events, in the good and the bad times of their lives. And it is timely because as a world right now, we have this need for collective playfulness. We have the need to bring playfulness back into what we do because, we're all under so much pressure and it's a heavy place, whereas you can bring this unique perspective to it. So I think that sounds great. And that's the third element of our story. Now, the fourth element is human, right? So this is where we talk about the person that would be interested in this story. If you think of the world, there are people with a bazillion different interests out there. People who are looking for, education, learning, entertainment, information. We all seek out information in general for different reasons. So here we need to imagine and we need to picture the persona that's going to be interested in that story. Maybe they will be entertained by it. Maybe they will be inspired by it. It doesn't matter, but we need to picture them. So if you were to imagine a persona that might find your story interesting, Maurice, who do you think that person would be? Would they be young? Would they be old? Would they be professional? Would they be sort of a student or somebody who's at home taking a career break? What kind of person needs to hear about a marketer who, as a result of his background in music, really pushing the message of playfulness?
I think it's someone who is really stuck in perfection. It might be someone who is tied up by trying to do everything perfect, finding this one right way, because there might be 5 right ways to do this.
So do we think that potentially they are a professional who's maybe anxious about their career or just feeling really stressed and feeling like they're not enjoying what it is that they do? Could that be somebody that would would be interested in hearing your story?
Yeah, who feel a bit stuck in certain kind of project, especially when it comes to creative projects, because creativity can show up as something really complex and difficult and unapproachable. Yet it's not. There's a lot of guidelines, but guidelines are different than rules, right? And until you learn the difference, you can be really confused. What is good, what is not good, what is working, what isn't, especially when it comes down to creative decisions.
Okay. That's all perfect. So thinking very strategically and very clearly about that, I think that we're imagining a persona that is a professional. They're probably in a professional field at the moment. Maybe they are in a career rather than they own their own business, possibly. And they are feeling really stuck. They're feeling stuck maybe about their projects, or they're feeling stuck about where they are in their life. And they're looking maybe for a bit of, and would you say they're looking for inspiration?
Yes, for inspiration and also permission, perhaps.
Oh, that's a nice one. Okay, so maybe they're looking for permission to see things a little differently.
Yes.
Okay, I like that. Okay, so now, Mars, we can picture that person, can't we? We can picture the human that is going to get value out of this particular story. And now that we have all the elements, we have those 4 key elements of your story. Now we need to work out our A, okay? And our A is our angle. And when a journalist or a podcast host, or again, a member of the media is going to receive a suggestion from you, be featured on their, again, podcast, newspaper, magazine, whatever it is, they are looking for an angle. And an angle is, in a way, a combination of a lot of these other elements. And we have to find that angle, usually by looking at something that is, again, quite a package. So we might look at some data, for instance. So we might look at data around people that are leaving their jobs because they are feeling really stressed. Okay. And we might find out that there has been a 10% increase in the number of people that are leaving their jobs in 2023 because they are feeling stuck. Or we might find, data around people that are getting, being signed off work, sick, because they are feeling stressed. And so that's a really good way to know that an angle is going to come together if you can find some data to match it. And most countries have, national statistics offices, or there's the media itself where you can go to see about these new studies that have taken place and where you can find data. Data is very, very powerful for creating the angle of your story. And you kind of need to look at it as a whole. So when it's an angle, you're kind of coming to it from a perspective of, in light of the 10% increase in people leaving their jobs in 2020, leaving their corporate jobs in 2023, you might be inspired by my story as a marketer who's found that the creativity of music has completely allowed me to unlock a new area of passion for my job. And that means that I haven't been tempted to leave my job, and instead it has given me increased productivity, something like that. And a journalist is going to receive that complete angle. And instead of it saying something like, hey, I'm Maris, I'm a marketer, could I please be featured in an article about my tips for marketing? Suddenly you are giving them a whole package where they actually stop and think, wow, that's something that my readers would love. Okay, so at the end of this process, by the time you've got to this point in the framework, you will find that you've got something that you can write up that feels like a complete package, that feels like a story with an angle. And the A also stands for the sort of subtext of the A is authority, right? So again, that's something that we come to from StoryBrand as well, where authority is a very important part of a story. But this is where I might say, you might add in, and I'm not kind of coming to this without experience. I actually had a number 1 hit, which again is when the journalist will say, oh, okay, this is somebody who's got quite an interesting angle on this story. Let's get let's get them in to talk about this, and then you're featured in the magazine. And so the last step of this, once you've gone through all the different steps, and now you've got your angle, and it's a complete story, that's when you then have to look for your M. Okay, and your M is media. And as you can imagine, Morris, there's a million different places that you could tell this story. But what you need to do then is reverse engineer it. And at this point, you're thinking not about the persona, not about the human, but about the media that would benefit from your story and would reach your human. So you're looking at, again, is this person listening to podcasts? Are they reading blogs? Are they being featured on YouTube channels? Do they read magazines? Are they more traditional? And once you think about the different types of media where your human might be getting their information, that's when you can go down the route of finding the right journalist on that media, or the podcast host, or the producer, or whatever the right person might be. You can find their contacts on something like Apollo, where you can find people's contacts and get that information. And you can write to them with your complete Gotham framework story, and this, very interesting pitch. That's what it's called. When you reach out to a journalist, when you reach out to a podcast host, it's called sending them a pitch. And I guarantee they are so much more likely to accept your story than if you just reached out and said, hi, could you feature me, please? Because we go through this again and again with our clients. And once they have the sort of complete vision of what is being sought after by the journalist, the media, and the human, then that's it. Suddenly they're unlocking all these amazing opportunities for PR. And that's exactly, what we try to do. So, Morris, when you look at it like that, when you see that framework, does it come together? Do all those story points come together as something that you can think, yeah, that might be something I would go and speak to a journalist about and know that I could add value?
Yeah, this sounds really, really interesting, and I think very useful, because you also give people a value that's not about you. You have an angle in this approach, how it's gonna benefit somebody who will be listening to this interview or conversation. So yeah, this sounds really interesting, really good.
Good. I'm glad. So again, now, you have an opportunity to reach out and tell this story. But just like we took different diversions at every part of the framework, that story, your PR angle could develop in 100 different ways, depending on the story that you wanted to tell, on the media that you wanted to be featured in, on the angle that you wanted to present. So it's just the basics of what could turn out to be a new way of thinking about telling your story. At the end of the day, I know that most of your listeners will be interested in how to increase their business, how to get in front of new audiences, how to get the PR they deserve, because it's so important today to have your as seen ins on your website and all the different, benefits of PR. So hopefully this will inspire some people to think outside the box a bit on their story, and therefore, to get some really great PR out of it.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much for taking time to lead me through this. I'm definitely benefiting from this, and this is going to be also on my blog. So if for anyone who's listening, please go and write down these points, and also reach out to Joe asking for help with PR. So thank you so much, Joe.
Sure.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about this framework that would be really useful?
I mean, I think the key thing is to know that the difference between somebody that is out there in the media, getting great PR and all over the newspapers or whatever, and somebody that isn't, is that they are going out there and they are putting themselves out there. I think sometimes it's tempting to say, hey, why didn't I get chosen for that article? I'm a better marketer, or I'm a better singer, or I'm a better whatever, why am I not being seen and featured? But the truth is they are doing it. They are their own PR people. If they haven't hired an agency, which some of them will have done, but they are their own PR people, and they are really good at talking about themselves in a way that is interesting to other people. And once you understand that and you have a framework to unlock your own story, then you are going to get the PR you deserve, because the truth is journalists and creators and podcast hosts are all looking for great stories to tell. And if you connect with them in a way that is sympathetic to their readers or listeners, you are going to get featured. So my message is, use the framework, get out there, get in touch with some journalists, start small. You don't need to be on Forbes as your first opportunity or on CNN. You can start with a local podcast or, with a local publication in your area, or a niche publication in your area, and build it up from there. But anyone can get PR.
Thank you, Joe. That's really inspiring. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for being on the show. I'm really excited to see how people are going to apply this.
Great. Me too. Thanks again for having me, Mara. See you soon.
This was a conversation with Jo Caruana introducing her GOTHAM framework. Now that you know the GOTHAM framework, try creating your story you can share with the media world. And remember, start small. I especially like Joe's reminder that the difference between the people who show up regularly in media is not that they are more talented, it's because they are intentionally working on their PR. I hope that encourages you to take the first steps into building your PR. Don't forget to check out the show notes for Joe's website and free PDF, How to Be a Great Podcast Guest. That's all for this episode, but don't miss the next episode where Susan Python will share her new book, The Business of Stories. Harness the power of storytelling to demonstrate your value, attract your ideal clients, and get paid what you're worth. Here's a clip from the next episode.
The thing to remember with going beyond the giving tips and going more into the being a little bit vulnerable and sharing stories is that you will be inspiring people, right? You will be making people feel seen and heard. There'll be people who will read your story or hear your story, and they'll feel relieved that someone else felt the same and managed to get through it. They might feel grateful that you've shared that story. They might feel hopeful that maybe they too can, overcome this challenge and get to where they want to get to. Your stories are so powerful in showing other people what's possible for them, in a way that sharing tips and other content, which I'm not saying don't do that, absolutely do those tips, create all the value, create the templates and the things people can go away and use and implement. Amazing. You want to be doing that stuff too. But don't forget to weave stories into everything that you do, because they are the piece. They're the heart piece, right? They're the piece that people will connect with emotionally. And that's very different. That takes your messaging to another level.
I love the point Susan is making, that stories can bring back the heart into our business. This will be another great episode. Subscribe not to miss it. Thank you for tuning into this episode of our Story Clicks podcast, where we explore ways to grow your business, develop your creativity, and live life better.